the noise and conversation.
Ooh, Chris Ware. Hey, well, everybody, welcome to the green room for DisrupTV. We're live here from the Minneapolis airport. Here with my amazing co-host, Vala Afshar, our great producer, Elle, and of course, our wonderful guests. As you know, we introduced our guests in reverse order of appearance. And let's start out with our friend Sebastian. Welcome. Where are you coming in from? What are we talking about today?
Yeah, hi, from Munich, so from the other side of the Atlantic today. So I'm really excited to talk about how we can build more curious organizations to drive transformation with data.
Excellent. And of course, he's got his new book, and we'll talk about that book, of course. And of course, my dear friend, Charlene Li, welcome. So where are you coming in from today, and what are we talking about?
I'm in San Francisco, and we'll be talking about my latest book, Winning with AI. And it's about how you can actually create value with AI and where to start.
Yes, and a 90-day blueprint for success, of course. Let's get back to it. All right, well, that, Elle, we're actually on time for once. Why don't you call the show? Let's go.
All right, 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us on DisrupTV. My name is Vala Afshar. I'm the Chief Evangelist at Salesforce and your co-host for the next hour. You're welcome to follow us on X, send us your questions live, and we'll try to answer them in the next hour. It's my pleasure to introduce my co-host, Ray Wang. He's the CEO, founder of Constellation Research. He's the best-selling author of Everybody Wants to Rule the World. I'm telling you, Ray, I see you just about every day. Fox Business, Bloomberg, CNBC, CNN. He's all over television. He's one of the top futurists to follow on X at RWANG0. Welcome, Mr. Wang, to DisrupTV.
Hey, thanks a lot. You're an amazing co-host, co-founder, Vala Afshar, Chief Evangelist for Salesforce. He's also the author of multiple books, including Boundless, Autonomous. These are all #1 sellers on Amazon, and they're pathways to the future. Executives around the world are paying attention to every one of his inspirational and innovative, insightful tweets. And when he's not hosting, keynoting, or leading events for Salesforce, you can watch him on business TV outlets such as Bloomberg, ABC, and more. And of course, he's posting insightful analyses, especially about this program and industry trends, of course, on ZDNet. So with that, who do we have to kick it off today? One of my special friends.
Ray, for you and I, for folks who have imposter syndrome, having a 7-time best-selling author just instantly reminds me I got to do more. And who doesn't want to win more with AI? I mean, this should be on everyone's desk. And for that, we're fortunate to have Charlene Li, co-author of Winning with AI, the 90-day blueprint for success. Charlene is a New York Times best-selling author of 7 books, 7, including The Disruption Mindset, Open Leadership, and the critically acclaimed book Groundswell. Her latest book, Winning with AI, which was just published March of this year, hot off the shelf, lays out a master plan for AI strategy. Charlene is a business transformation strategist who spent more than 2 decades. She started when she was like 11, guiding organizations through disruptive change. Charlene is an experienced speaker who's inspired leaders across the globe, including keynotes, World Economic Forum, TED, South by Southwest. In addition to her writing and keynotes, Charlene is founder of Quantum Network Group and previously founded Altimeter Group. I think, Ray, you may know about Altimeter. Her work focused on helping organizations navigate disruptive change, the future of work, and most recently, the strategic implementation of AI. Named as one of the most creative people in business by Fast Company, Charlene's work has been featured in Wall Street Journal, New York Times, USA Today, 60 Minutes, ABC News, CNN, and many mainstream publications and news outlets. welcome, Charlene, to DisrupTV.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Sorry I had to cut your bio short. We only have an hour. You've done a lot. That was like 5%.
Yeah, and your congrats on the new book. And your co-author Katya Walsh is one of our BT 150 alumni from 2023. So lots of great stuff here. So AI, topic du jour. Many organizations are trying to figure out how AI fits into their business, but there are a lot of misconceptions leaders have about AI adoption. And of course, who is there better than you to break down those myths? So what are some of those things? And where do you see people actually breaking through these barriers and actually making those gains?
Well, I think the biggest one is that AI is a tool or in technology. And yeah, it does a lot of things. It is something that is technology driven. But the problem with AI, and the reason why many organizations aren't seeing the value, is that they're treating it just as a technology. In reality, it is a leadership and strategy challenge to organizations. And so the result is that leaders have abdicated that responsibility and tossed it over to IT and say, go find something to do with this. And they're not leading and saying, this is how we can actually use it to transform our organizations. So I think the organizations that are doing a good job are the ones who are thinking about how decisions are going to change, how workflows are going to change. And also they're thinking about this as more, again, than that technology implementation. It's not just about adopting the technology, it's about how are you going to adapt your organization. So that's the biggest one that I see out there.
I love right up front, things this book will tell you that others don't. Use cases are not a strategy. Love that. You need an AI value owner. Love that. Rest in peace, AI pilots. Pilot purgatory kills momentum. You list all these like incredible wisdom nuggets. And I work for an AI company, and I strongly agree with everything right up front in terms of why you should read this book. You also write in the book that AI should serve business strategy, not the other way around. Why did you make that distinction up front? And it's critically important.
Right, because people think I need an AI strategy. And I believe you should never begin a strategy with a technology. It's almost like saying, let's have an electricity strategy. Let's have an internet strategy. And that's putting the technology front and center. And what we've seen, Ray, we've talked about this, when a new technology comes along, all reason goes out the window. Big, bright, shiny object, but let's go figure out what this technology does. And instead, we should be thinking, this is our business strategy. This is our mission, our purpose, our values. These things are fundamental to who we are and what we do and the value that we create. How do we use AI to support those strategic objectives? And one of the best strategy documents I saw is they listed 7 strategic objectives, 6 were the usual suspects, and number 7 was we will use AI to achieve the first 6. And I think that's the right perspective to be putting here. It is something that you have to put in the context of the way you do business and potentially how it could change, reinvent, and transform your business too.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a mindset shift that's important here. And those companies that do this correctly versus the companies that don't take into that account. And so you talk about all these things that are important to get to that level of success, whether it's focusing on AI's building blocks, being able to actually get to the right roadmap, thinking about the strategy. Where would you say organizations are in terms of being successful implementing AI, and what makes them more successful than those that are stuck doing pilots? I mean, how many more pilots can we take?
Yeah, but some organizations say, look at how many pilots we're doing. We're doing AI. I'm like, no, you're just messing around. You're experimenting. And so we say, again, as Vala was saying, kill all your pilots. Just stop doing them. And instead, pick the few that are going to be really meaningful, that are going to drive value. And again, this isn't to say stop all the things that you're doing in the departments. This is about the enterprise level types of things that require that cross-departmental, interdisciplinary approach to driving big V value in your organization. And so the organizations that I think are doing it right have leadership involved. Leadership isn't saying, this is something that's really hard. In fact, they're overcoming what I call the AI hesitancy gap. There's this gap between people saying, I'm excited about AI, I have FOMO, and then this other fear that they have, fear of getting in, or what I call fogey. So you have this gap between them. And people say, well, it's too dangerous. Things are changing too quickly. I'm not sure about this. So they're just sitting on the sidelines, they're being spectators. And there's pressure building on them from their employees, from their boards, from their customers to act. And they're just frozen in that hesitancy. So this is the biggest challenge right now, is organizations who are bridging that gap, moving into action, have found ways to get their leadership involved and actively championing and using the technology themselves.
I'm going to start using Fogey because you know, when you talk about execution velocity and the importance of speed, you gotta recognize this Fogey, and then you got to do something about it. So, two-part question before we get into negative impact of Fogey and speed, because you're writing the book, Speed is the New Moat with AI today. First mover advantage is back. Fast followers end up slow losers. So I want to talk about speed and why it's important. But before I get to that, obviously you're a serial best-selling author. As someone who aspires to write more books, why do you write? Are you just exceptionally good at it? Clearly the answer is yes. But what motivates you to be a prolific writer? And why did you write this book? And what's the process of picking big ideas that turn into best-selling books? And walk us through, help two aspiring authors who I'm trying to get to my fourth, so I'm way behind. But for me, it's like going to a dentist. It's not a joyful experience for me anyway. Tell us how you go through the process of selecting a topic and why you write such successful works.
Well, we pick a problem, a pretty big problem that feels inscrutable, looks complex. And not only do we explain the problem, we also say, this is what you have to do with it. And that's been the hallmark of every single one of my books. And I talk about it as there's a book in my belly that needs to get out. And there's a bigger story to tell than a single article. And this book in particular really needed to be out there because it is a soup to nuts. How do you begin? What do you do first? What do you do second? And honestly, when we started the book, we didn't know what the answer was. And that's the most interesting part about it.
That's cool.
And, you know, when you think about how do you put together a strategy, a roadmap for AI, where do you begin? And literally, we tried all these different variations, tested it, did tons of research, and figured out you start with what you know. In a world where everything is changing, you start with what you know. You know your customers, you know your business, you know your company, you know your strategy. Start with what you know, and then take the unknown and try to figure out how that fits into that world. Because if you try to start with the unknown, you're just going to get lost and go around in circles. Yeah. So when I work with executives, it is always, let's start with your strategy. And this is the interesting thing. They may not always be clear what their strategy is. So it's a really interesting moment of connection, of alignment, of people coming together. Like, this is what we're trying to achieve. If you know that, then you have a fighting chance of knowing how to use AI to create that value, to seize those opportunities, and also to overcome those challenges.
That's awesome. And then the speed part, can you talk to us about the importance of speed, specifically to this?
Yeah, because we say speed is the new mode. And this is a great quote from Vikram Mahidar, who's also an investor and thought leader in AI. And the reason why speed is so important is because everyone has access to the same technology. Everyone has access to amazing data inside their organizations. So this is about how quickly you can adapt your organization, as I was saying before. And we know that change is really hard. So how ready are you to change? My focus in my career has been on disruption. I wrote this book called The Disruption Mindset. And disruption is a strategy in itself. How will you set yourself up and prepare yourself for that journey ahead and the change that is coming? Because if you want to create and see just exponential value, then you can't incrementally get there. And frankly, any sort of growth that you have, if you want outsized growth, is going to be disruptive. So welcome to this world. AI is not going to be easy. It can be quite simple. Like, apply that. So frameworks are quite simple, but it's never easy. It's actually quite messy. And I believe that leaders do not take the time and preparation to prepare themselves and their organizations for that messy journey.
It is the messiest technology. I've been in tech for 30 years. Builder the first half, observer, synthesizer the second half. I've never experienced something so messy because of not because of the technological transformation part of it, but the relational transformation. you have to rethink workflows and structures and KPIs, and you got to reskill people, redesign processes. It's messy. My company's going through the most messy period of its 27-year history, and I've known the company for 23 years. So, you know, I knew the company was 300 people, and now it's 85,000, and I can't think of a messier time. It is.
Well,
and people talk about messy middle. It's messy beginning, messy middle, and nobody has any idea about the end. So you know, it needs folks that can help us connect the dots. Sorry, Ray. I know.
right.
I have a question to ask.
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, part of that messiness is knowing when to get started. And what you've done is laid out a clear 90-day, let's get going kind of, you know, approach. There's a roadmap, but that first 90 days is really important. And go talk about why. I mean, go deep as to, you know, the clients you're working with and some of those things that you pull out into the book, right? Because you're working with a lot of leaders, helping them with the strategy. And, you know, and people are like, oh, this will be easy. I'll just pop in AI. It'll be great. And you're like, yeah, good luck. Well, you don't say that, but we think
no,
that, right?
I tell them this is going to be really messy, buckle up your belts. And first of all, it's messy because it's people. And we oftentimes forget that. And the real thing about AI is that it's challenging our sense of identity, of how we create value. And if you don't address that as part of your roadmap and understand the human factor of AI, and you think, oh, I'm just going to figure out how we can automate as quickly as possible and how many jobs we can cut. And that's what people are thinking, and that's what they're feeling. And many leaders, those are the questions that they're asking all the time. I'm like, wait a minute. If that's the only thing you're thinking about with your business, if you're just thinking about let's 10x my people and then I can fire the other 9, that's the wrong way to think about it. That's a status quo way of thinking about it. What if you could 10x 10 people? I want to get 100x. What new capabilities could you be doing? We're thinking along the wrong plane here. So again, part of this is asking leaders. I think you've talked about being courageous, but I also talk about having some imagination here.
Yeah.
And I think the ones who are winning are seeing that. And one of my favorite examples in the book is a company called Connecta. They're a call center. And you think, oh, it's a call center. They're just going to cut all their people and put AI in. And from the very beginning, they go, no, that's not the purpose of this. You don't have too many people. We don't have enough of the right people, the good people. So how do we use it to increase quality? So they reduce the error rates by 85 to 90% with co-pilots. Wow. How do we increase the level of engagement we have by reducing the time they have to spend on the routine things so AI can take care of that? And we're going to increase the time, decrease the time to training to get people to a high level of quality by 30 to 40%. And they started reinventing the things that they do because now we have these new capabilities. We're going to take law firms who we serve a lot and do something like look at their non-performing loans that used to take months, and we can do it in minutes for them. So they're developing new services for new clients. And here's the impact of that. They have committed to increasing their headcount over the next 2 years by 5%, not cutting it. So I wish more leaders would be like that, where they're looking at, and they started this at the beginning of 2023. They've been doing this now for 3 years. They are so far ahead of other companies because they have had the courage and that imagination from the very beginning to, again, not just look at this as a technology, but to use it as a way to accomplish those strategic goals in a very, very different way.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Because so much of the narrative has been around subtraction. Doing more with less, being more productive, EBITDA, margin. I understand the language of business is finance, and I understand the amazing superpowers of AI in terms of making companies more efficient. But there hasn't been a lot of conversation about adding value, reclamation of value, like value that was ignored in the past for maybe economic reasons, and now you can, take the low impact, highly deterministic work and outsource it to smart software or hardware and free up your people to do things that we've ignored in the past. So when you're working with executives, and how do you help them identify, the best business value leveraging AI? How do you help them flex those imagination muscles that may have been dormant for some time?
Well, I try to make it real for them, first of all. So it's just like, give me your top personal challenges and give me your top corporate challenges as an enterprise. And there's no shortage of this. And also any opportunities that you see, like, if we could only do this, like, let your imagination run wild. What could you do? And the reality is the reinvention and the opportunities, you may not be able to see them because the challenges are so big. But you may need more exposure to, again, think about things in a different way. I get the connector and the non-performing loans for law firms. That was not something that was on the roadmap in the beginning, but that emerged as an opportunity because they now had new capabilities themselves that they could then apply. And that came from people working on those accounts. It didn't come from just top leaders. So I think that when I work with leaders, I want to make it as real and concrete for them. Because these leaders are successful because they know what they have to accomplish. Their top objectives can fit on their hand. They only have 5 things that they care about. So make sure that AI is related to one of those 5 things that they care about. Otherwise, you're just noise.
Yeah.
Why do I need to talk to you? I can easily ignore you. I can just flick you off my table. I got better and more important things to deal with. So when AI becomes essential, you don't think about readiness because you're never ready. You don't think about feasibility because, frankly, it's not feasible given what you have today, what you know today. But if it's strategically important, you will chase it.
Yeah.
You will pursue it. You will put it at the very top of your agenda. And that's the key thing right now for leaders is to not think about this as AI, but think about it as the strategic objectives, empowered, enabled, accelerated because of AI. And
That's a
then
great
because
point.
it is strategic, you're going to go fast.
It's
Like,
a great
why
point.
wait?
That strategic aspect is everything. And I think strategy and operations have never been so close. They're collapsing. In fact, your strategy and operations are now the same thing because you're operating in that level of speed and that level of direction. The other piece we're seeing is 85% of the Fortune 500 is only growing at single digits, and they need an accelerant to growth. We actually believe 1/3 of the CEOs we see today will be gone by 2028, mostly because they're like, I'm done. There's no playbook. I'm at the top of my game. I can't figure this out. Why don't we hand it off to someone else and figure out what's going on? But before they get there, they've got to get to this AI fluent workforce. And you spent some time talking deep about that in one of the chapters about designing that AI fluency. What does that AI fluency look like? And why is this so important at the cultural level to enable the change that we're trying to get to?
Right. We talk about 4 building blocks, and the first one is mindset, and the second one is skill set, then tool set and decision sets, governance. Love governance. We can talk about that to the ends of the earth. But when you're talking about AI fluency, it is about this flow, this ability to just reach naturally for AI. You feel like you can use it well. You know what it can do, and just as importantly, what it cannot do. You're using it responsibly and ethically. And I would add as part of that sustainably too as well. And then you are also able to use it in your job and do it well. And most organizations are providing maybe the tools, they may be giving a little bit of training, and they're definitely not giving people the time to practice and to get that fluency. I equate it to using a pair of chopsticks. The first time you're handed 2 sticks and go eat food with this, you're thinking, you're insane. Like, how am I going to do this? And eventually you practice with it, you get better at it, and eventually just shoving food in your mouth. And I think this is what it's like with AI. You just kind of flow into it. I think that moment of clarity comes when you're not quite sure how to do something. And then this is the meta part. You ask AI how to use AI to do that thing. And when you get to that point, then you go, oh, okay, now I get it. I can use this tool to figure out how to use this tool. So fluency is an attitude. It is the fact that I can turn to it. You never completely master it. You don't have to be completely on top of it. It's so interesting, right? Leaders will come to me and go, how do I get up to speed? How do I get on top of what's happening with AI? And I'm like, you'll never feel like you're on top of it. I study this space and I turn around like, what just changed? How did the world just completely change? So this is not about knowing everything, knowing the latest models, because it doesn't matter. What you need to know, again, is define your problem and then know how to use AI to solve that problem. That's fluency.
Well, only tens of thousands of people watch this show, so I don't know why I'm admitting this, but I'm pretty proficient with chopsticks, but sometimes at home, I just poke at the dumpling, or I bring the plate and use the chopstick as a shovel.
Hey,
Sorry,
Vala, just so you know, I do that too.
Okay, all right. I'm just like,
We all do
I don't
that.
know why I'm admitting this, because at a restaurant, just because I love sushi, you know, I'm a power user of the sticks, but at home I just revert back to, you know, non-traditional use. Anyway, you talk about value owner. Does that imply companies should have a chief AI officer, or should there be a value owner embedded within each line of business? What is a hierarchy of group of men and women who are responsible for measuring business value from deploying AI?
Well, I think we're in an interesting time right now where people are still trying to figure out, what is this? How do we drive value? And so this is why governance is so important, because until people know what the rules are, you really have to spell them out for people.
Sure.
And the same thing with leadership is, okay, you want everyone to be using AI and driving value with AI, but people aren't quite sure how to do that. So as organizations mature, you will have people who automatically know what that looks like, what the metrics look like. But until then, let's give them some guidance. And the reality is everybody is using AI. Everybody owns a piece of the AI value puzzle. So you have the HR person thinking about the workforce of the future. You have the go-to-market people engaging and creating new customer experiences. There's a CFO looking at token use and the cost of that. So you have all these people who own pieces of the AI. But if everybody owns AI, then nobody does.
Yeah.
You need one person who wakes up every single morning and makes sure that everyone in the organization is coordinated, following a central roadmap, knowing that they're all pulling in the same direction at the enterprise level within their functions and departments, staying coordinated, and very importantly, going at the same tempo, going at the same speed. So think of this person as a conductor, the orchestrator, because you can't have jackrabbits pulling ahead, and you can't have these turtles who are just falling behind and dragging everyone along. So you want everyone to be coordinated. And because things change so quickly, you're updating that roadmap. Ideally, at a minimum, once a quarter, but I see some organizations that are doing it constantly. They're constantly adjusting that roadmap. And the value owner is responsible for making sure everyone knows what that roadmap is, how it's changing, how it impacts them. I like to say that you're doing strategy and execution right if everyone in your organization can answer these three questions. One, what's the future we're headed towards? What's the future we believe? Where are our customers going to be? What's our strategy to get from where we are today to that future? And then what is my role in making that strategy a success?
That's very cool.
And so that's something that every executive needs to own up and down throughout the organization. And until they can articulate that value owner is helping them articulate that. They're laying out the narrative for each person to write their story on top of that. And it becomes incredibly powerful when people can write their own story on something, because then they own it.
We're starting to monitor speed across our business by token consumption, but specifically tokens that actually retire tasks. So we call them work units, because vast majority of tokens do not retire tasks. So they're not actually executing jobs to be done. We see massive variance in efficient use of token, not just volume, but efficient use. We're also looking at partner implementations outside our business in terms of who's implementing agents in the most effective way. It's amazing when you digitize at the atomic level, you can absolutely measure speed and flow and unnecessary friction. So, but you're right, a value coordinator that actually understands the motion across a business, one as large as my company's, is almost a prerequisite. It can't be, you can't just let it happen by osmosis. It requires discipline and intentionality.
And what happens today is, this is technology. I'm going to have my CIO do this.
Yeah,
the CIO has typically been in a procurement role. They're not even builders anymore.
Yeah.
And so how do you get somebody hasn't built things in years, the department isn't even focused on that, to actually implement AI and then understand how business is going to drive it? This is not the right person. If you are so lucky to have that transformational CIO, bless you, you are incredibly lucky. That is not the typical situation people are in.
It's true.
So
and we do have a
think
unicorn CIO, but as you said, 90% of the work starts when the AI is active. It's not like you sell them software and you're done. The 10% is just kind of selling the next thing. this is
Yeah.
the real messiness is when it's active and it's in use, and all the fine tuning, all the iteration, all the optimization. You have to be a constant builder. It's a whole different ballgame. Yeah, that's why it's so important.
Yeah, one of the most interesting companies technologies I see out there are companies like Ember. It's founded by the former CEO of Ancestry, Blue. And what they're doing is they're going in and helping people rewrite that workflow, but they don't go away. They're there to constantly adjust it, maintain it, because agentic AI isn't a one and done. It is something you have to continuously adjust because everything else around that system is constantly changing.
It's
So I'm very
massively
optimistic
dynamic.
about those kinds of things. Yeah, it's very dynamic. It is not one and done. And most organizations, many organizations do not have
They
the
don't.
capability and won't acquire that anytime soon.
We're here with Charlene Li, 7-time best-selling author, co-author of Winning with AI, along with our friend Katya Walsh, a BT 150 alum, the 90-day blueprint for success, out from Amplify Publishing, this out March, I believe. And thank you so much for coming on the show, sharing your wisdom, and of course, check out the book.
Thank you, Charlene.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, join us in the green room when you're done. So cool. Oh, look at that.
Wow. Okay, this is, I know it's FIFA World Cup. I should be using, football analogies, but this is like the cleanup hitter spot in baseball. A person comes in at the end, hits a grand slam. Everyone's happy and more informed. So we're fortunate to have, what a lovely book cover too. And this is a substantive book. Data Inspired. We have Sebastian Wernicke, author of Data Inspired, Building an Organizational Culture, Inquiry for Lasting Transformation. This book just literally hot off the press. It came out in June of 2026. Data Inspired is a roadmap for business leaders to unlock the full potential of data, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. A leading expert in data and AI strategy, Sebastian believes that the key to unlocking data's power lies not in technology, but in leaders fostering a culture of evidence and inquiry. For over 20 years, Sebastian has guided organizations around the world to harness the power of data and AI to achieve breakthrough transformation. Sebastian's ability to make complex topics around data accessibility, engaging, and actionable has made him a sought-after speaker and workshop facilitator. He has 3 acclaimed TED Talks. Ray, three.
Yeah.
You and I need to step up our game. And these 3 TED Talks have garnered over 5 million viewers around the globe. Welcome, Sebastian, to DisrupTV, and congratulations on a beautiful book.
Well, thank you so much, and great to be here.
Great to have you.
We're happy of having you here. And really, you are one of the big data geeks out there. And it's really important to take that.
We say that affectionately, by the way.
Level.
Oh,
Yes,
I take no offense at all. No.
So the difference between data-driven and data frustrated, I think this is very important, because at one point we used to tell our friends that your data lake looks like a data swamp, and they were very frustrated. So what's going on right now between data-driven versus data frustrated?
Yeah, I think it's not just what's going on right now. It's what's been going on for years and years. That's actually the mystery. So if 10 years ago or 15 years ago, you asked companies, are you really happy with what you're getting out of data? You've been promised all of these substantive changes. We had these old cliches like data is the new oil and, gruesome. But everybody was thinking, oh, they promised me these great changes. My business is going to take off because I have data, and then because I have big data, because I have analytics, because I have machine learning, digitalization, all of these buzzwords always going around. And the story is always the same. When you ask leaders, is this a priority for you? Almost all of them say, yes, absolutely. We're making this a top priority item. I mean, now with AI, it's like 99%. There is no other question where you get 99%. You ask people, do you like listening to music? You get 98%, right? So everybody sees this as a top priority. And at the same time, if you ask these leaders, are you happy with the results you're getting? Is it really delivering on the promise? Then it's always like 2/3 of leaders, and that's been consistent over years, who say, actually, we're not really quite happy with that, right? It's okay, we're getting some value out of it, but we're not getting that transformative value. We're not really becoming a new version of ourselves. And that leads to this data frustration, because you've been promised all of these wonderful opportunities. At the same time, you're not getting them, and you are spending a lot of money while you're not getting them. And so at some point, you just ask yourself, okay, am I doing something wrong? Is something wrong with the technology? And then data frustration, I think, is actually only stage one, right? Then afterwards, you get into a bit of data cynicism, yeah, where you say, we tried this years ago. It has never worked for us. And so it's this spiral of frustration that I think companies need to get out of. And because that problem has been persisting for year after year after year, I think it's also just an interesting mystery to say, well, why is that the case? I mean, why is everybody frustrated for so long, and what's happening there?
I was watching your video on why your data strategy keeps failing, and it was amazing, right? I mean, I felt like I was reliving my nightmare in every
Sorry
company.
about that.
No. But what was amazing about it is you hit every single point of why the data strategy fails. And data is the foundation of all these AI activities. And if you can't get your data strategy right, no wonder people's AI processes and AI projects are all failing. So.
Yeah, and I think it's these fundamentals that are always overlooked. And I think that now with AI, it's clearly data that is one of these fundamentals. But there's even, I think, a more underlying theme here, and that is the cultural theme. Because if you're expecting transformative change from data, from AI, from whatever technology, you have to address that cultural topic and basically say, what we're doing here is not a technology initiative. It's a huge transformation and change initiative, and we need to approach it as such. So suddenly, in the same room that you're discussing the latest technologies, you need to start talking about things like, what's our culture? What's our decision-making culture? What's our culture of change? And ultimately, and that's why I love this in the subtitle of the book, do we have a culture of inquiry? Are we curious enough to actually explore what this technology offers us, and then to pull through and to say, okay, here's the implications, and now let's go on that journey. And if that isn't happening, you are going to stay frustrated. And always the same reasons are going to pop up of why you're frustrated, right? You're going to perceive this through symptoms like leadership isn't paying enough attention. You don't really think that people have all the necessary skills. The business cases are kind of unclear. And all of that is going to surface again and again and again, unless you say, okay, this is a transformation, so we need to define the purpose. So what Charlene said resonated so much, right? We need to start with a purpose here, and we need to start with a strategy, and we need to understand why are we doing this before we embark on the journey.
I love that. By the way, I know it's an amazing book because when I turn to the back cover, Seth Godin, Linda Hill, Amy Edmondson, all three are some of our favorite guests on the show. So you're in great company because first of all Thinkers 50, all of them recommending your amazing work.
I'm very grateful to all of them for doing that. Yes,
they're exceptional people, and all three expand our minds every time we speak to them. And Linda Hill is a neighbor. I'm Boston based, so. It's extraordinary to have a thought leader that teaches at a university about 15 miles from my home. So how should we you talk about data literacy, a digital mindset, culture you just referenced. How should we be thinking about data? How should we frame data in order to be inspired by it, in order to actually drive meaningful outcomes?
Yeah, I think the most important question to ask in the beginning is, what's the purpose of data? And the answer you'll often get is something like, well, the purpose of data is to generate these insights that we can then do something with. And I think the best way to think about data is to say, well, the purpose of data is actually change. The purpose of data is to change the decisions you're making. The purpose of data is to change the way you're running your business. Because if data doesn't cause change in the end, then we don't need all that expensive technology. We don't need all that effort to clean the data, keep it in order, think about our data management and all of these fun topics. And once you acknowledge that, I think it's then about realizing, okay, so how does data actually create change? Well, I think most humans operate on an intuition that I like to call the data deficit theory, right? It's this thing of, if only we bring the right data to the right people at the right point in time, suddenly magic will happen. And we have decades of psychological research that shows this is not the case. The more we believe something, the more we are invested in something, we don't turn to data to change that, right? We have all of these biases kicking in to say, rather than admitting we were wrong, we'll say, well, that data seems kind of sketchy. I don't believe that. And by the way, that analyst telling me that, kind of weird person, so I'm choosing not to believe them, right? And so I think we need to address that theme of saying, well, data alone is not going to create that, but we need to put ourselves into a very specific state of mind in order to be receptive to data. And we are not alone in an organization, of course. You know, there's all these other people around us. There is politics, there is incentives, there's goals. And so how do we ensure that when the data is telling us we need to do something different, that this can actually gain traction? And
Sebastian,
I think that is sort of the seed of that.
That is a great segue. And especially when you're talking about what's happening with data in general, and how it actually impacts people's decision making, because everyone says they're data driven, but then there's all these other factors. So tell us actually the 3 myths of data, what's going on with the data, because that's a good grounding point for those who think, hey, this is data driven and it's going to be X, Y, and Z, but the reality is something else, as you know.
I mean, the main reason why we all want to be data driven is because it sounds like comfort, right? It basically like, oh God, all of this decision making, and I have these people around me, they're discussing all the time. There's all these gut feelings. Oh my God, you know, we want to be data driven. We want to ground everything we do in hard facts. And so we all, I think, intuitively believe 3 myths about data, and I'm going to unpack each of them. But the 3 myths are, first of all, that data is objective. Secondly, that data speaks for itself. And third, that data will give you always clear answers to your questions. And the reality is completely different because, first of all, data is not objective. Data is if you will, a compression algorithm, right? That takes reality that is out there, and you have to make lots and lots and lots of decisions to compress everything that's out there into a number. I mean, just if you think about some of the KPIs you might be using in your organization, right? To say, how many active customers do we have? That's not something that immediately pops out of a database. You need to make lots of decisions like, who's a customer? When are they active? And how are we going to measure that? So the data itself already has a history, and that history matters when you're trying to make decisions with it. The second part is then, well, we might say, okay, let's agree, data has the history, we understand it all. Then surely, once we have the data, we can clearly say what the data is telling us. And I have this one example in the book where I will show you that this is absolutely not the case. So the example is about 3 TV shows, and you're supposed to be determining, based on the user ratings, which one of these shows is the best one. And it turns out that for each of these shows, you can make a very rational and logical argument. So you will have one show that has the best average rating. Okay, so clearly that must be the best one. But then it turns out, it doesn't have that many ratings. So maybe, you know, we want to be sure. We want to have shows that are rated by lots of users because otherwise we have the variation. So throw that out. And you're ending up with another show that comes out on top. And then there's a third one, which has the least number of worst ratings. So if you are saying, well, I don't want the best average, but basically I want to ensure that nobody has a bad time with it, there's a very rational argument to be made for choosing that show as the best one. And so what it turns out is that this simple word of best show, actually, there's quite a lot to unpack there if you want to confront that with data and say, well, what does best actually mean for us? And how do we define that? And if we don't define it up front, of course, what I could do is I could just choose my favorite show. I could present you with a very logical argument of, this is our selection mechanism. Isn't that great? And it's so objective, and I can end up wherever I want. Which doesn't mean that data is arbitrary or that you can do whatever you want, but it says you need to be careful about that. And you need to really think through, how are we going to turn our intuition of what we want to find into something that then is an analysis. And so then maybe to quickly touch on the third data myth, which is that data always gives you these clear answers. Well, as soon as you're in a more complex analysis, of course, you're not in the realm of bean counting anymore, you know, basically saying, oh, it's 10, it's 5, it's something. You're very quickly entering the territory of statistics. And so in statistics, of course, there's never a true or false. There's a likely, there's an unlikely, there's a maybe. And if you're not prepared to deal with that myth, of course, most data analysis can be super frustrating for decision makers when they say, well, what's the best way to go? Is it option A or option B? And then the analytics person comes to them and says, well, yeah, with about 70% chance, we think it's option B. Drives them nuts, right? What is 70%? I want to be right here. So do I go left or do I go right? What is this telling me? And so I think the purpose of these data myths, well, one, they're of course interesting to think about, but it's also, I think, a very important part of expectation management. Because if you approach data by thinking, this is going to be objective, I'm going to get a clear answer, and all of this is going to be easy, you are bound to be disappointed. And I think you're also bound to not engage with the nuance and the complexity and the richness that most data offers you, but you're just narrowing it down to saying, is it this or that? Which then, of course, also makes you quite prone to, again, just confirmation bias and sort of, trying to drive the data, or sometimes also driving the poor person who's analyzing the data to come to a certain conclusion, right? And give you a certain direction that is palatable.
That's awesome. Well, our producer, Elle, is taking copious notes because I often ask her, is this the best podcast show? And now she has all these different variants that she can put into her formula to respond to me.
Yeah, reach out to me. We'll find a way to.
Yeah, my simple answer is yes, it is, because we get the smartest, best people come and share with us every Friday. So that's my only measure.
You have your definition already. Perfect. Yeah.
But I have to tell you, it lacks some quantitative analysis. I just feel good about the show every Friday. So for me, as long as Ray and I are smiling at the end, we're doing something right.
Yeah, we're doing well.
But now, after listening to you, I think, Ray, one to do for us is we got to answer that question. Where do we rank in terms of shows, and how can we improve our reach? But in any event, but I have to tell you, one of the reasons why Ray, Elle, and I have these conversations is there is safety with three people that deeply respect, like each other, to be able to question data, to be able to question our approach. I mean, the show is called DisrupTV, so we've disrupted ourselves numerous times over the last 10 years, including this is, I think, our 5th platform we're on in the 10 years we've been doing the show. Talk to us about the importance of safe environment where you are given in fact, not only given the permission, but it's celebrated that you question data and you question assumptions, and you challenge certain validities and dominant logic in order for you to drive change in a meaningful way.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, there's this little survey I like to do whenever I give talks somewhere, which is like I ask the audience to 3 questions, right? So I ask them to put up their hand if they would say that their organization or the department they're running is data driven, right? And most hands go up because it's the thing that you do today. And then the second question is, well, in the last month, did you really change your mind based on something that you did? So where you believe something based on data?
Wow.
Hands go down a little.
Wow.
And then question 3 comes, which is, in the last month, has your manager changed their stance on something because they were presented with contradicting data? And they look around, as the camera filming me.
No.
The hand, of course, goes down. And that, of course, is, I mean, the standard setting, right? We look, especially to leaders, of course, to project that security and to tell us, this is the way, this is what I believe in, this is where to go. And if you want to create that curious culture of inquiry where data is really used to drive the organization forward, you need to make it acceptable to present, well, everybody, but especially leadership, with contradicting data, and have that lead to a productive discussion, to a discussion of curiosity, where it's not about who's saying that or I don't believe it, but rather, oh, that's interesting. What more can we investigate? What can we find out about that? And that culture of safety is something that has to be very, very consciously created. So when I speak to leaders, I think oftentimes their stance is, well, if somebody brings me contradicting data, I don't mind, that it's fine. And what they don't realize is that even if that is true, which I don't always believe it is.
Not always.
No, not always. But even if that is true, I think there's still a high barrier, just the way that we're wired. There's hierarchy involved. And it's just difficult if you're in a junior position or in a junior analyst position, also not that operationally involved, to really speak truth to power here and say, this is what the data is saying, and I'm sorry, it goes against what you just proclaimed in that meeting to everybody else. And so as a leader, you don't just need to basically say, I don't mind. I think you need to very publicly create that space and that safety and make it, lead by example and demonstrate to everybody that this is not just something that you accept, but it's something that you welcome, or even better, something that you expect. You expect to be challenged with data, and you expect to have these curious discussions, which is why I think exactly it works so well for you three, right? You know each other, you have that trust, and you can have that open discussion then. But in most organizations, of course, that is not the case. And people will always look at not what's written on the posters in the hallway, right? Where they say, we're data-driven, we have open discussions, but they'll look, okay, de facto, what happened in the last meeting? And with my social spidey sense, do I think that'll get me the promotion? Do I think that'll get me the bonus? And that has to be really lived by leaders in order to set the tone here and to create that open space where you can then really attack the problem and use data to attack the problem rather than attacking the people that are, involved in that discussion.
We had Colin Breyer on our show. He was called Jeff Bezos' shadow because he followed him around for so many years. And Jeff said, Colin said, when Jeff has meetings, he deliberately calls the most junior person in the room to speak first. Is Jeff creating a safe psychological space and promoting the best ideas winning, not the best titles, by inviting the most junior person to share data? And that gives permission to everyone to have the courage and inquisitive mindset to collaborate. What are your thoughts about, what's a practical thing that a leader can do to create that data-inspired environment? What's something they can do?
Yeah, I think this is a very good example, and I also think that Amazon, and I cite Colin's book in my book as well, because I just think it's really great examples of this. I think Amazon has thought really, really hard about what the best ways of using data are, at least for Amazon, right? So they've put a lot of thought into not just, we're going to use data everywhere, but how exactly are we going to use it? So there's also a lot of thinking they have done on how we're going to deal with things like performance indicators, how we're going to deal with anecdotes, especially how we're going to deal with anecdotes once they contradict the data. And like you say, I mean, it's also a great example to say, I will have the most junior person speak up. I mean, that, of course, is only step one. I think you can still have a setting where you ask the junior person to speak first, and still they're going to learn very quickly what is perceived as helpful and not so helpful once they present their analysis. So there is, of course, also that follow-up. I mean, what I would do as a leader, or actually what I also try to do myself, is to always find these examples where data contradicts me, and to just put myself into a state of mind where I say, I will now have to very publicly and demonstrably show that I'm willing to change my mind here, that I'm willing to be wrong, and that I am listening to the data. So I think it's that type of engagement, and you're going to find data that contradicts you. I mean, unless you're running a very simple business, of course there's data points out there that don't disagree with you, that don't fit the story, that are uncomfortable. And then making it a case to basically say, okay, here's how I am going to deal with this. Here's how we as a team are going to deal with this. So it's consciously creating these situations, these examples that people think about of, okay, here we are curious, here we investigate, and it's okay, and it's encouraged. And then ideally a year later, if they have been doing a good job otherwise, you promote that person and you give them the bonus and say, okay, thanks for challenging me. And that's what people are going to notice.
Love that. I love it because it shows there's an element of vulnerability. There's an element of self-awareness. There's an element of humility. There's an element of a listening culture. You're inviting contradictory or data points that are orthogonal to your. And by the way, I didn't like this data is the new oil. I never liked it. I actually think data is water. It's got to be safe to consume. It's got to be affordable. It's got to be accessible. I never understood the goop of oil analogy, but
Oh, there's so many analogies out there. One of my favorite ones is data is the new bacon. I still don't know what to make of that.
Well,
Right? It's like,
bacon is all around good. So.
Everyone loves bacon. Everyone loves bacon. You're okay there.
it is too much not healthy for you, you know?
Yeah,
Is
you
that,
know,
are they trying to say that
if
about
I'm going to
data?
inspire anyone in my household, I just got to show them bacon. But okay, all right.
But hey, let's jump deep. You have this concept called radical data integrity, talking about trustworthy data. What is radical data integrity? Do most companies have it? Do most people have that? Where does it go?
No, I think most companies, when they think about data quality, and that is what it comes down to in the end, I think they are thinking about clean data. And then you ask, well, what does that really mean? And then they say, well, the clean data is it's probably not missing too many data points. It sort of adds up to our balance sheet. Then it must be clean data. And if you want to use data on a daily basis, and especially if you want to use data to challenge the status quo, what's very, very important is that data is totally trustworthy. And trustworthiness is something different than cleanliness. So you can have a data set that is not clean at all, but it is still extremely trustworthy because you know exactly how it was generated, you know exactly what's in it, you know exactly what's wrong with it or where you can and cannot use it, and you also know who's accountable for it. So you actually have a person there where if you have a question about it or you're finding something off or something seems weird, you can go to and say, okay, help me understand this, help me fix this, help me get this right. And so I think radical data integrity is about this trustworthiness and a radical honesty that you say, data will never be entirely clean. Data will never be fit for every purpose. That is an illusion. You have to just acknowledge data is what it is, and you need to understand what's in it, what's not in it, and you need to know who to trust with it. And I think that's the concept you need to live for. But of course, that is something that I only see very few organizations achieving. I think mainly for the reason that many organizations still perceive data as this one-time effort. You know, it's like the annual spring cleaning where they say, this whole thing has become a bit messy. Oh God, okay, let's budget the cleanup project. And then they do it and everything's organized and so on. And then a year later, they turn around and say, oh God, you know, now we again have shadow data and all of this messiness going around, rather than really saying, how do we build a consistent and resilient system that ensures that data carries that integrity and trustworthiness with it on a constant basis.
I love that.
Where's the Marie Kondo of data when we need her?
That's like my New Year's resolution.
Does this data spark joy? Yes.
Yeah. My final. Okay, let's follow up on that. My final question to you: do you remember the first time you fell in love with data? Like, was it a mentor? Was it a sponsor? Was it a project? Was it a research initiative? Do you, in your illustrious career as a world-renowned, data expert and change agent, do you recall the moment where you realized this is my calling? This is what I love doing, helping people drive change by using data in a meaningful way.
And you get 30 seconds to say it.
Two-step process. My first falling in love with data was when I studied bioinformatics, because I just found it amazing what's in the data about the human body. Wow. Unfortunately, there was not too much data going around when I finished. The second time was when I first had access to the complete ERP of a European bank, and I had the feeling I can see everything here. You know? So that was awesome.
It's superpower feeling. If information is power, you had superpowers. That's awesome.
People came to me and they're like, how do you know that? And it's in the data.
Wow.
Yeah. Amazing.
Wow. That's awesome.
Sebastian Wernicke, author of Data Inspired, Building an Organizational Culture of Inquiry for Lasting Transformation. Hey, get your curiosity out there, especially for the data. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for coming in live from Munich. So appreciate having you on the show.
This was fantastic.
We'll see you in the green room.
Thank you for having me.
You're amazing. You're amazing. Congratulations on the book. Just came out in June. Amazing.
June 2nd. Yes, there you go.
It feels good. Like, both books feel great to hold, but there's something about,
It sounds like you're in the process of writing another book, Vala. You're getting there. You're getting the tactileness of the book, the cover, what does it look like? The colors, chapter titles.
Are you sharing breaking news on the show?
No. I think you're sharing breaking news.
Oh, no. Getting close, Ray. Getting close. But that,
Getting
you know,
close.
we'll talk about that.
This is what my
later.
summer's for. I got to write a book
Yeah.
during the summer.
That's awesome. Wow. You know, listen, winning with AI requires you to be data inspired. I mean, at the end of the day, by the way, this is why we have the best producer in the world. These great thinkers and doers, they don't accidentally show up. To do this, you have to have this. You know, drop the mic. You know, yeah. I mean, that's those are, it's peanut butter and jelly. You know, that's the sandwich of success. All right. Next Friday, we got Lee Rainey, Director, Imagining the Digital Future Center at Elon University, as our first guest. And we have TVN Reddy. Tivan Reddy, I like that, TVN Reddy, Chief Executive Officer at Aptian, will be joining us. If it's Friday, it's DisrupTV. Thank you for all your recommendations. Thank you for all the great authors that you recommend for Elle, Ray, and I to consider to bring on the show. We're going to probably cross 70 authors this calendar year on Disrupt. So the momentum is strong, and we learn from each and every one of them. Closing remarks, Ray.
Oh, you know, look, AI is happening. If you're not ready for it, it's going to happen at the cultural level. It's going to happen at the leadership level. You know, Charlene did a great job explaining where we are, giving us a 90-day blueprint of success. But really, this is deep in the business. It's not going to be once and done. It's dynamic. It's going to be constant. And if we think about what we need around the data and the inspiration around the data, we really got to think about how we're going to go from data frustration to data inspiration. I mean, those 3 myths on data were real, right? It's not objective. It doesn't speak for itself. And of course, you don't get clear yes or no answers. And that's what we're going to find out as people jump in. So it is peanut butter and jelly. We're going to put them together. And of course, read both books at the same time. And you might get something very, very powerful on the back end. So back to you, Vala, but we've got to go, and we'll see our authors in the green room. Thanks, everybody.
We'll see everyone next Friday. Bye, everyone.